Quran chapter 49, Surah Al-Hujurat by Sayyid Qutb. Translation by Muhammad Al-Amrani. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. O you who have attained to faith, do not place yourselves before God and His Messenger, but remain conscious of God. Verily, God is all-hearing, all-knowing. O you who have attained to faith, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet, and do not speak to him aloud, as you speak loudly to one another, lest your deeds come to naught without your even realizing it. Behold, those who lower their voices in the presence of God's messenger, those are the ones whose hearts God has tested for consciousness of him. For them is forgiveness and a great reward. Verily, those who call out to you from behind the apartments, most of them do not use their reason. And if they had only been patient until you came out to them, it would have been better for them, for God is much forgiving, a dispenser of grace. O you who have attained to faith! If a wrongdoer brings you any news, verify it carefully, lest you harm people in Jahiliyyah and later be filled with regret for what you have done. And know that among you is the messenger of God. If he were to follow your inclinations in many matters, you would surely suffer. But God has endeared faith to you and made it seem fair in your hearts, and has caused you to abhor disbelief, wickedness, and rebellion. Such indeed are those who are rightly guided, as a bounty from God and a blessing, for God is all-knowing, wise. And if two groups of the believers fight one another, make peace between them. But if one of them transgresses against the other, then fight the one that transgresses until it complies with God's command. And if it complies, then make peace between them in justice, and be impartial, for God loves those who act justly. The believers are but brethren. So make peace between your brethren and be conscious of God, that you may be graced with His mercy. O you who have attained to faith! Let not one group of people mock another group. It may well be that the latter are better than the former. Nor let women mock other women. It may well be that the latter are better than the former. And do not defame one another, nor insult one another with derogatory nicknames. Evil indeed is all gross misconduct after having attained to faith, and anyone who does not repent, such are the wrongdoers. O you who have attained to faith, avoid most suspicion, for behold, some suspicion is a sin, and do not spy on one another, nor backbite one another. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? No, you would detest it. So be conscious of God, for verily God is an acceptor of repentance, a dispenser of grace. O mankind! Verily, we have created you from a male and a female, and have made you into nations and tribes, so that you might come to know one another. Verily, the noblest of you in the sight of God is the one who is most deeply conscious of Him. Verily, God is all-knowing, all-aware. The Bedouins say, "We have attained to faith." Say to them, "You have not yet attained to faith." Rather say, "We have submitted, for faith has not yet entered your hearts." But if you obey God and His messenger, He will not diminish anything from the reward of your deeds, for God is much forgiving, a dispenser of grace. The believers are only those who have attained to faith in God and His messenger, and have never since doubted, and who strive with their possessions and their lives in the way of God. It is they who are truly sincere. Say to them, "Are you going to inform God of your religion, when God knows all that is in the heavens and all that is on earth, and God has full knowledge of everything? They regard it as a favor to you that they have submitted. Say, do not regard your submission as a favor to me. Rather, God has conferred a favor upon you by guiding you to faith, if you are indeed truthful. Verily, God knows the hidden reality of the heavens and the earth, and God sees all that you do." This chapter, though composed of only 18 verses, is of immense and profound significance, containing within it great truths of faith, law, the nature of existence, and human reality. It opens up vast horizons for the heart and mind, evoking deep thoughts and grand meanings. It encompasses principles of moral education, spiritual refinement, and foundational legal precepts, far exceeding its brief length. It presents two great matters for contemplation and reflection. The first thing that strikes the observer when contemplating this chapter is that it lays down a complete framework for a noble, pure, and sound society. One that is based on the principles and foundations that ensure its proper establishment and preservation. This is a world that issues from God, journeys toward God, and is worthy of being attributed to God. It is a world pure of heart, clean of emotion, chaste of tongue, and above all chaste of conscience. It is a world that observes propriety with God, with his messenger, with itself, and with others. It is a world where decorum governs the innermost thoughts, the movements of the limbs, and all outward actions. At the same time, this world has its own laws and systems that organize its external order, ensuring its preservation. These laws and systems are rooted in this decorum, emerge from it, and harmonize with it, so that the inner and outer aspects of this world are in perfect concord. Its laws and emotions are in balance, its impulses and restraints are in harmony, and its feelings and movements are coordinated as it journeys toward God. Thus, the establishment and preservation of this noble, pure and sound world is not left solely to the conscience and the inner purity of the individual, nor is it left entirely to external legislation and organization. Instead, both the individual's conscience and the external systems of the state come together in mutual cooperation and coordination. This world is one that observes propriety with God and with his messenger. This propriety is expressed in the individual's awareness of his limitations before his creator and the messenger who conveys the divine message. O you who have attained to faith, do not place yourselves before God and his messenger, but remain conscious of God. Verily, God is all-hearing, all-knowing. Thus, a believing servant does not attempt to precede God in any matter, be it command or prohibition. He does not propose anything to God regarding judgments or decrees, and he does not act contrary to what God commands and forbids. This awareness is born of fear, reverence, modesty, and proper decorum with one's Creator. Moreover, there is a particular decorum in addressing the messenger of God, in revering him, and in showing humility before him. O you who have attained to faith, do not raise your voices above the voice of the prophet, and do not speak to him aloud, as you speak loudly to one another, lest your deeds come to naught without your even realizing it. Behold, those who lower their voices in the presence of God's messenger, those are the ones whose hearts God has tested for consciousness of him. For them is forgiveness and a great reward. This world has its method of verifying reports and actions and ensuring that their sources are trustworthy before passing judgment. This method is based on consciousness of God and refers all matters to the messenger of God without proposing anything before him or offering unsolicited opinions. O you who have attained to faith! If a wrongdoer brings you any news, verify it carefully, lest you harm people in Jahiliyyah and later be filled with regret for what you have done. And know that among you is the messenger of God. If he were to follow your inclinations in many matters, you would surely suffer. But God has endeared faith to you and made it seem fair in your hearts, and has caused you to abhor disbelief, wickedness, and rebellion. Such indeed are those who are rightly guided as a bounty from God and a blessing, for God is all-knowing, wise. This world also has its practical procedures for dealing with conflicts and disturbances that may arise within its ranks, issues that, if left unresolved, could destabilize its structure. It faces such matters with practical measures derived from the principle of brotherhood among believers, the reality of justice and reconciliation, and consciousness of God, seeking his mercy and pleasure. And if two groups of the believers fight one another, make peace between them. But if one of them transgresses against the other, then fight the one that transgresses until it complies with God's command. And if it complies, then make peace between them in justice and be impartial, for God loves those who act justly. The believers are but brethren, so make peace between your brethren, and be conscious of God, that you may be graced with his mercy. This world has its own psychological decorum in how its members feel toward one another, as well as its outward decorum in how they treat one another. O you who have attained to faith, let not one group of people mock another group. It may well be that the latter are better than the former. Nor let women mock other women, it may well be that the latter are better than the former. And do not defame one another, nor insult one another with derogatory nicknames. Evil indeed is all gross misconduct after having attained to faith, and anyone who does not repent, such are the wrongdoers. It is a world of pure emotions, with sacred boundaries where people's honour is safeguarded, backbiting is forbidden, and no one is taken to account based on suspicion. In this world, no one's privacy is violated, and no one's dignity or freedom is unjustly compromised. O you who have attained to faith, avoid most suspicion, for behold, some suspicion is a sin. And do not spy on one another, nor backbite one another. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? No, you would detest it. So be conscious of God, for verily, God is all-forgiving, all-merciful. It is a world with a comprehensive concept of the unity of humankind, despite its varied races and nations, as God has established for them a single standard by which all are measured. God's standard, free from the distortions of prejudice and passion. O mankind, verily we have created you from a single male and a single female, and have made you into nations and tribes so that you might come to know one another. Verily the noblest among you in the sight of God is the one who is most deeply conscious of him. Verily, God is all-knowing, all-aware. And after presenting these grand truths, the truths that are sufficient to delineate the contours of this exalted, noble and pure world, the Surah goes on to define the essence of faith, by the call of which the believers are summoned to bring this world into existence. It is by the name of this faith that they are called to respond to God's call, who invites them to take up his charges described in such beautiful terms which stir the heart and inspire obedience and submission. O you who have attained to faith! This beloved call, which fills the soul with awe, compels the one addressed by God to respond, a call that makes every duty lighter, every hardship easier, and inspires the heart to listen and obey. The desert Arabs say, "We have attained to faith." Say, "You have not yet attained to faith." Rather say, "We have outwardly submitted to God." For true faith has not yet entered your hearts. But if you truly obey God and his messenger, he will not diminish anything of the reward of your deeds. Verily, God is much forgiving, a dispenser of grace. The true believers are those who have attained faith in God and his messenger without ever wavering, and who strive with their wealth and their selves in God's cause. These are the truthful ones. Say, do you wish to teach God about your faith, seeing that God knows what is in the heavens and what is on earth, and God has full knowledge of everything? This surah, in its conclusion, reveals the immense divine gift bestowed upon humankind, the gift of faith, which God bestows upon whomsoever he wills, according to what he knows of their worthiness. They regard it as a favour to you that they have embraced Islam. Say, do not regard your embracing of Islam as a favour upon me. Rather, it is God who has bestowed a favour upon you by guiding you to faith, if you are truthful. Verily, God knows the hidden reality of the heavens and the earth, and God sees whatever you do. And the second matter that emerges upon reflection on this surah, and upon reviewing the contextual circumstances that accompanied the revelation of its verses, is the tremendous and unrelenting effort represented by the Quranic directives and the wise prophetic upbringing. These were the means by which that Muslim community was established and nurtured, a community that embodied that exalted, noble, pure and harmonious world which once became a living reality on this earth. Since then, it has ceased to be merely an idealistic notion or a fleeting dream, a vision confined to the imagination. This ideal community, which became a tangible reality for a brief period in history, did not arise suddenly, nor did it appear by chance. It was not created overnight, nor did it come into existence by a divine miracle that instantly transformed the nature of things. Rather, it grew slowly and naturally, like a towering tree with deep roots. It took the necessary time for its growth, just as it required continuous, steady and persistent effort for its development. It needed vigilant care, prolonged patience and wise nurturing through pruning and guidance, encouragement and correction, strengthening and reinforcement. It also required enduring the bitter realities of experience and the harsh trials of affliction, with the lessons of those trials serving as a source of instruction and reflection. Throughout all of this, the divine care for this chosen community was manifest in its education and growth based on divine knowledge, so that it could bear the great responsibility entrusted to it, and so that God's will might be fulfilled through it on earth. This divine care was coupled with the virtues inherent in that generation and the latent capacities hidden within them, as well as the favourable circumstances and conditions that surrounded them. All of this culminated in that extraordinary moment of illumination in the history of humanity. A reality emerged that from a distance may seem like a dream hovering in the heart, or a vision with wings fluttering in the imagination. O you who have attained to faith! Do not place yourselves ahead of God and his messenger, but remain conscious of God. Verily, God is all-hearing, all-knowing. O you who have attained to faith, do not raise your voices above the voice of the prophet, nor speak to him loudly, as you speak loudly to one another, lest your deeds come to naught without your even being aware of it. The surah begins with the first beloved call, the first stirring of hearts. O you who have attained to faith! A call from God to those who have believed in him unseen, a call that stirs their hearts by reminding them of the bond that ties them to him, and makes them aware that they belong to him, that they bear his insignia, that they are his servants and soldiers on this earth, and that they are here to fulfill a purpose that he has ordained and desired. He has made faith beloved to them and adorned it in their hearts as a grace and favour from him. Thus it is only fitting that they stand where he has commanded them to stand, and that they stand before God as those awaiting his judgment and direction, regarding themselves and others, doing what they are commanded, accepting what is decreed, and submitting in total surrender. O you who have attained to faith! Do not place yourselves ahead of God and his messenger, but remain conscious of God. Verily, God is all-hearing, all-knowing. O you who have attained to faith, do not propose anything to God and his messenger, whether concerning your own selves or the affairs of life around you. Do not speak about a matter before God has spoken about it through the tongue of his messenger, and do not judge concerning a matter without first referring to the word of God and his messenger. Qatada narrated that some people used to say, if only such and such were revealed, if only such and such were made lawful. God disliked this and revealed the verse. Al-Awfi mentioned that they were forbidden from speaking in the presence of the Prophet. Mujahid said, do not precede the Prophet in speaking until God has revealed his command. Al-Dahak said, do not rule on any matter of your religion without first referring to God and his messenger. And Ali ibn Talha reported from Ibn Abbas, do not contradict the book and the sunnah. This is an inner discipline, a refinement in one's relationship with God and his messenger. It is a method of receiving and implementing divine guidance. It is also a foundational principle of legislation and action. And it stems from a deep consciousness of God, from an awareness that God is all-hearing, all-knowing. All of this is encapsulated in a single short verse, touching upon and depicting these great fundamental truths. Thus, the believers refined their manners with their sustainer and with their prophet. No longer would any one of them propose something to God and his messenger, nor would anyone offer an opinion unless the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, had asked for it. None of them would pass judgment on any matter unless they had first referred to the word of God and his messenger. It is related that Ahmad, Abu Dawood, Al-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah narrated, on the authority of Mu'ad, may God be pleased with him, that when the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, sent him to Yemen, he asked him, by what will you judge? Mu'ad replied, by the book of God. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, asked, and if you do not find it there? He responded, by the sunnah of the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, asked, and if you do not find it there? Mu'ad replied, I will use my own judgment. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, then struck his chest and said, praise be to God, who has guided the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, to that which pleases the messenger of God. So much so that it is narrated that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, would question them about the day they were living in, or the place they were in, even though they knew it well. Yet they would refrain from answering, fearing that they might speak before God and his messenger had spoken. It is related in a hadith of Abu Bakr Nafi ibn al-Harith al-Thaqafi, may God be pleased with him, that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, asked during the farewell pilgrimage, what month is this? We replied, God and his messenger know best. He remained silent, and we thought he would call it by a different name. Then he said, "Is it not the month of Dhul-Hijjah?" We said, "Yes, indeed." Then he asked, "And what land is this?" We replied, "God and his messenger know best." He remained silent, and we thought he would call it by a different name. Then he said, "Is it not the sacred land?" We said, "Yes, indeed." This is an example of the humility, the caution, and the consciousness of God that the believers attained after hearing that call and receiving such guidance. It is an expression of the reverence they developed towards God and his messenger, and the caution they exercised in their speech, lest they should inadvertently precede God and his messenger. The second discipline is their etiquette with the Prophet in speech and conversation, and the deep respect they harboured for him in their hearts, a respect that manifested in their tones and voices, and that distinguished the person of the Prophet and his presence among them. God calls them to this discipline with that beloved call, and warns them against violating it with a stern admonition, "O you who have attained to faith! Do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet, nor speak loudly to him as you speak loudly to one another, lest your deeds come to naught without your even being aware of it. O you who have attained to faith, revere the Prophet who has called you to faith, lest your deeds be rendered worthless while you are unaware. Beware of this slippery path that may lead to the nullification of your good deeds without your even knowing it. Be conscious of it." This beloved call and this fearful warning had a profound and lasting effect on their hearts. It is related in Sahih al-Bukhari that Ibn Abi Mulaika said, "The two best men were about to perish, Abu Bakr and Umar, may God be pleased with them both. For they raised their voices in the presence of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, when a delegation from Banu Tamim arrived in the 9th year of the Hijrah. One of them suggested that the Prophet appoint Al-Aqra ibn Habis, may God be pleased with him, as their leader, while the other suggested someone else. Nafi said, "I do not remember the name of the other man." In another narration, it is said that his name was Al-Kaka ibn Mabad. Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with him, said to Umar, may God be pleased with him, "You only wanted to contradict me." Umar replied, "I did not want to contradict you." Their voices were raised in that debate, and so God revealed, "O you who have attained to faith, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet, nor speak loudly to him as you speak loudly to one another, lest your deeds come to naught without your even being aware of it." Ibn al-Zubayr, may God be pleased with him, said, "After this, Umar, may God be pleased with him, could barely be heard by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, so much so that the Prophet would have to ask him to repeat himself." It is also reported that Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with him, said, "By God, I will never speak to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, except as though I were whispering." Imam Ahmad narrated that Anas ibn Malik, may God be pleased with him, said, when the verse, "O you who have attained to faith, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet," was revealed, Thabit ibn Qais ibn Shammas, who had a loud voice, sat in his house in sadness, saying, "I am the one who used to raise my voice above the voice of the Prophet. I am among the people of hell, and my deeds have been nullified." He stayed in his house, grieving. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, noticed his absence and sent someone to inquire about him. The man came to him and said, "The Prophet is asking about you." Thabit replied, "I am the one who raised my voice above the voice of the Prophet. My deeds have been nullified, and I am among the people of hell." The man returned and informed the Prophet of what Thabit had said. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "No, rather he is among the people of paradise." Thus their hearts trembled and quivered under the weight of that beloved call and that fearful warning. They became deeply respectful in the presence of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, fearing that their deeds might be nullified without their realizing it. Had they realized, they would have immediately rectified their actions, but it was the hidden pitfalls they feared most, and so they feared and avoided them. God praised this consciousness, this lowering of voices in the presence of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in a wondrous expression. Verily, those who lower their voices in the presence of the messenger of God, they are the ones whose hearts God has tested for righteousness. For them is forgiveness and a great reward. Righteousness is a great gift, one that God grants to hearts after testing and purifying them, after refining and preparing them, so that He does not place it in a heart unless it has proven worthy. Those who lower their voices in the presence of the messenger of God are those whose hearts God has tested and made ready to receive the gift of righteousness. And with this gift, He has also granted them forgiveness and a great reward. This is the deep encouragement that follows the fearful warning. It is how God nurtures the hearts of His chosen servants, preparing them for the great task they will undertake, just as He nurtured the early believers with this divine upbringing, guiding them with light. It is reported that the commander of the faithful, Umar ibn al-Khattab, may God be pleased with him, heard the voices of two men raised in the Prophet's mosque. He came to them and said, "Do you know where you are?" Then he asked, "Where are you from?" They replied, "We are from Taif." He said, "Had you been from the people of Medina, I would have struck you." The scholars of this ummah have understood from this that it is disliked to raise one's voice at the grave of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, just as it was disliked during his lifetime, to show respect for him in all circumstances. The surah then alludes to an incident that occurred when a delegation from Banu Tamim arrived to meet the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in the 9th year of the Hijrah, the year known as the Year of Delegations, when delegations from all over Arabia came to embrace Islam after the conquest of Makkah. These were rough desert Arabs, and they called out to the Prophet from behind the apartments of his wives, which overlooked the Prophet's mosque, "O Muhammad, come out to us!" The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, disliked this rudeness and disturbance, and so the verse was revealed. "Verily those who call out to you from behind the apartments, most of them do not use their reason, and if they had only been patient until you came out to them, it would have been better for them. Yet God is much forgiving, a dispenser of grace." Thus God described them as lacking in reason, disliking their lack of decorum and the disruption they caused, which was inappropriate in their interaction with the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, their leader and teacher. God pointed out what was better and more appropriate for them, patience, waiting for the Prophet to come out to them, and He encouraged them to repent and turn back to Him, promising them forgiveness and mercy. The Muslims absorbed this sublime etiquette and extended it beyond the person of the Messenger of God, may peace and blessings be upon him, to every teacher and scholar. They would not disturb them until they came out of their own accord, nor would they intrude upon them until summoned. It is narrated about Abu Ubaid, the pious and trustworthy scholar, that he said, "Never did I knock on the door of a scholar until he came out at the time he chose. O you who have attained to faith, when a corrupt person brings you any news, verify it, lest you harm people unknowingly and then become full of regret for what you have done. And know that the messenger of God is among you. If he were to follow your wishes in many matters, you would surely suffer hardship. But God has made faith dear to you and adorned it in your hearts, and has made disbelief, wrongdoing, and disobedience hateful to you. Such are they who are rightly guided through God's bounty and favour, and God is all-knowing wise." The first call had established the source of authority and the fountainhead of all guidance. The second call established the etiquette and reverence that leadership demands. These two foundations form the basis for all the instructions and laws within this surah. For it is essential that the source from which the believers take their guidance be clear, and that the position of leadership be respected, so that all subsequent guidance and legislation can carry the weight and authority of obedience. Thus, this third call comes to teach the believers how they should receive news and how they should act upon it, establishing the necessity of verifying its source. O you who have attained to faith, when a corrupt person brings you any news, verify it, lest you harm people unknowingly and become full of regret for what you have done. The verse specifically mentions the fasiq, corrupt person, because such a person is prone to falsehood. But this does not mean that every report should be doubted, for that would paralyze the flow of information within the Muslim community. The basic principle among the believers is that they are trustworthy, and their news is accepted unless there is reason to doubt. The Fasiq, however, is suspect until his report is confirmed. In this way, the community maintains a balance between accepting news and rejecting it without rushing into action based on false information. If the community acts hastily on the report of a corrupt person, they might wrong others out of Jahiliyyah and be left to regret their actions, which would have angered God and violated the principles of truth and justice. Many commentators have mentioned that this verse was revealed concerning Al-Walid ibn Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayt. The Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, had sent him to collect the arms from the tribe of Banu al-Mustalik. As Ibn Kathir relates from Mujahid and Qatada, Walid returned and claimed that the tribe had prepared to fight him. Qatada adds that he also reported they had apostatized from Islam. The Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, then sent Khalid ibn al-Walid, may God be pleased with him, to verify the matter, instructing him to proceed cautiously and not act hastily. Khalid arrived at night and sent out scouts to gather information. They returned with news that the tribe was steadfast in Islam, and Khalid heard their call to prayer and saw them performing their prayers. In the morning he approached them and was pleased with what he saw. He returned to the messenger of God, may peace and blessings be upon him, with the true report, and then God revealed this blessed verse. Qatada said that the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, would often say, "Verification is from God and haste is from Satan." This is also reported by several others among the Salaf, including Ibn Abi Layla, Yazid ibn Ruman, Al-Dahhak, and Muqatil ibn Hayyan. And God knows best. End of Ibn Kathir's commentary. The meaning of the verse is broad, encompassing the principle of verifying the news brought by a corrupt person. As for the righteous, their news is accepted, for that is the norm in the Muslim community, while the report of the corrupt is an exception. Accepting the news of the righteous is itself part of the process of verification, as they are considered a trustworthy source. Absolute skepticism towards all sources and reports contradicts the foundational trust that should exist within the believing community, and it would paralyze the smooth functioning of life. Islam allows life to proceed naturally, placing safeguards only to protect it, not to hinder it. This is an example of the general principle of accepting trustworthy reports, while making exceptions only for specific cases. It appears that some believers acted impulsively upon hearing the initial false report from Walid ibn Uqba, and they suggested to the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, that he should swiftly punish the tribe. Their zeal for God's faith and their anger over the withholding of zakah led them to such a suggestion. Thus the following verse came to remind them of the immense blessing that was present among them, so that they might recognize its value and always be mindful of it, and know that the messenger of God is among you. This is a reality that can be easily imagined because it took place and was witnessed. But upon deeper reflection, it becomes something immense, almost beyond imagination. Can one truly grasp the magnitude of the fact that the heavens were in constant, living contact with the earth? That the heavens would speak to the earth, informing its inhabitants of their affairs, both public and private? That their steps were guided, and their actions were corrected directly from above? One of them might commit an action, or utter a word, or conceal a thought, only for the heavens to be made aware of it, and for God Almighty to inform his messenger of what had taken place, directing him on what to say or do in response. Truly, this is a momentous matter, a tremendous news. It is a reality so immense that those living amidst it might fail to realize its full significance. Therefore, the believers are reminded of it in this way, and know that the messenger of God is among you. Know this and appreciate its full magnitude, for it is indeed a tremendous matter. One of the implications of this immense truth is that the believers should not act ahead of God and his messenger. But this instruction is made even clearer and stronger by the reminder that the prophets, may peace and blessings be upon him, guidance inspired by God always brings them goodness, mercy and ease. If he were to follow their suggestions in many matters, they would surely suffer hardship. For God knows better than they what is good for them, and his messenger, may peace and blessings be upon him, is a mercy to them in all that he plans and chooses for them. If he were to follow your wishes in many matters, you would surely suffer hardship. This is an implicit encouragement for them to leave their affairs to God and His Messenger, to enter fully into the peace of Islam, to submit to God's decree and guidance, and to refrain from making suggestions or being hasty in matters they think are good for them. Then the verse turns to remind them of the blessing of faith to which God has guided them, a faith that He has made beloved to their hearts, revealing to them its beauty and its virtue and attaching their souls to it. At the same time, He has made disbelief, wrongdoing, and disobedience hateful to them. All of this is from God's mercy and grace. But God has made faith dear to you and adorned it in your hearts, and has made disbelief, wrongdoing, and disobedience hateful to you. Such are they who are rightly guided through God's bounty and favour. And God is all-knowing wise. God's choice of a group of His servants to open their hearts to faith, to stir their souls towards it, and to make it beloved to them so that their spirits yearn for it, sensing its beauty and goodness. This choice is a favour and a grace from God, greater than any other favour or grace. Even the blessings of existence and life itself seem less significant when compared to the blessing of faith. As we shall see later in the verse, rather it is God who has bestowed a favour upon you by guiding you to faith. We shall elaborate on this divine favour, God willing, when we reach that part. What is striking here is the reminder that God Himself willed good for them. He is the one who purified their hearts from the evils of disbelief, wrongdoing, and disobedience. He is the one who made them rightly guided by His grace and favour. And all of this was decreed by His knowledge and wisdom. In affirming this truth, there is also an implicit encouragement for them to surrender to God's guidance and decree, to be at peace with the goodness that lies behind it, to refrain from making rash suggestions or hasty judgments about what they think is good for them before God chooses it for them. For God knows what is best for them, and His messenger, may peace and blessings be upon him who is among them, guides them towards that goodness. Human beings are often hasty, unaware of what lies behind their steps. They propose things for themselves and for others, not knowing where the true good or evil lies in their suggestions. Man prays for evil just as he prays for good, for man is ever hasty. If only people would surrender to God, enter into peace completely and be content with God's choice for them, trusting that God's choice is better, more merciful and more beneficial for them, they would find rest and tranquility. They would pass through this short journey on earth in peace and contentment. But even this is a favour and a grace from God, which He grants to whomever He wills. And if two groups of believers fight each other, make peace between them. But if one of them transgresses against the other, then fight the one that transgresses until it returns to God's command. And if it returns, make peace between them with justice, and be fair. Indeed, God loves those who are fair. The believers are but one brotherhood, so make peace between your brothers and remain conscious of God so that you might be graced with His mercy. This is a practical legislative principle for safeguarding the believing community from division and fragmentation, which can arise from impulsive actions and emotions. It follows from the principle of verifying the news brought by a corrupt person and the warning against acting hastily out of zeal and passion without proper confirmation. Whether this verse was revealed in response to a specific incident, as some narrations suggest, or whether it is a general legislation to prevent such situations, it nonetheless represents a comprehensive and sound principle for protecting the Muslim community from fragmentation and discord. It is also a means for establishing truth, justice, and reconciliation, all of which are rooted in the consciousness of God and the hope for His mercy, which is attained by upholding justice and righteousness. The Qur'an acknowledges, or perhaps anticipates, the possibility that fighting may occur between two groups of believers. Yet despite their conflict, it still refers to both groups as believers, even if one group may be wronging the other, or even if both groups may be wrong in some aspect. The Qur'an instructs the rest of the believers, those not involved in the conflict, to take the initiative and work towards reconciliation between the fighting parties. If one group persists in wrongdoing and refuses to return to the truth, just as two groups might both refuse reconciliation or reject God's judgment on the matter, they must be fought until they submit to God's command. God's command in this case is to end the conflict, accept his judgment, and resolve their differences in accordance with his guidance. Once the transgressing group accepts God's judgment, the believers must again strive for reconciliation based on strict justice and fairness. Indeed, God loves those who are fair. After this directive, the Quran stirs the hearts of the believers, reminding them of the strong bond that unites them, a bond that brought them together after they had been divided and reconciled them after they had been in conflict. It enjoins them to be conscious of God and hints at the mercy that will follow from such consciousness. The believers are but one brotherhood, so make peace between your brothers and remain conscious of God, so that you might be graced with his mercy. One of the natural consequences of this brotherhood is that love, peace, cooperation and unity should be the norm within the Muslim community, while conflict and fighting should be the rare exception that, if it occurs, must be swiftly resolved to restore the original state of harmony. To achieve this, the believers are even permitted to fight their own brothers who transgress, to bring them back into the fold and remove this deviation from the norm. This is a firm and resolute measure. Another implication of this principle is that during these internal conflicts no one should be harmed unnecessarily. A wounded person should not be finished off, a prisoner should not be killed, and those who retreat from the battlefield should not be pursued. The wealth of the transgressors should not be taken as spoils, for the purpose of fighting them is not to destroy them but to bring them back into the fold and reunite them under the banner of Islamic brotherhood. The basic principle in the Muslim Ummah is that the believers, wherever they may be, are united under a single leadership. If an imam is chosen, any subsequent rival claimant must be rejected, and his followers considered a transgressing faction that must be fought by the believers in support of the legitimate imam. It was upon this principle that Imam Ali, may God be pleased with him, fought the transgressing factions in the battles of the Camel and Siffin, and with him were many of the eminent companions, may God be pleased with them. Some of the companions, such as Sa'd, Muhammad ibn Maslama, Usama ibn Zayd, and Ibn Umar, may God be pleased with them all, refrained from fighting, either because they were uncertain of where the truth lay in that particular situation, leading them to view it as a fitna, temptation, or as Imam al-Jassas suggests, perhaps because they felt that the Imam had sufficient support and did not need their help. The first explanation seems more likely, as it is supported by their recorded statements, including Ibn Umar's later regret for not having fought alongside the Imam. While the basic principle remains that there should be one Imam for all Muslims, the Quranic text can still be applied in exceptional cases where there may be multiple Imams in distant regions as a matter of necessity. In such cases, the believers are still required to fight the transgressing faction with the legitimate imam, or if one group transgresses against another within his authority, until they return to God's command. Similarly, if one of the rival imams is clearly in the wrong, the believers must unite to fight the transgressing group until they submit to God's decree. Thus, the Quranic directive applies in all circumstances and conditions. It is evident that this system of arbitration and fighting the transgressing faction, until it returns to God's command, was instituted long before humanity's later attempts to establish similar systems. It is a system that is complete and free from the flaws and shortcomings that have plagued all of humanity's feeble and clumsy efforts in this regard. Moreover, it possesses the qualities of purity, honesty, and absolute justice, for it refers all matters to the command of God, which is free from any ulterior motives, passions, or deficiencies. Yet humanity continues to stumble and falter, while the clear and straight path lies before them, well trodden and illuminated. O you who have attained to faith, let not some people ridicule others, for they may be better than them, nor let women ridicule other women, for they may be better than them. Do not defame one another, nor call each other by offensive nicknames. How vile is it to be called a transgressor after having embraced faith? And whoever does not repent, such are the wrongdoers. The virtuous society that Islam seeks to establish through the guidance of the Qur'an is one characterized by lofty manners, where every individual enjoys a dignity that must not be violated. for the dignity of the individual is part of the dignity of the entire community. To mock or defame any individual is to mock and defame oneself, for the entire community is one body, its honor indivisible. In this verse, the Qur'an addresses the believers with that beloved call, "O you who have attained to faith," and it forbids them from mocking one another, neither men ridiculing other men, for they may be better than them in the sight of God, nor women ridiculing other women, for they too may be better than those mocking them in the balance of God's judgment. There is a subtle suggestion here that the outward qualities which men see in themselves, and which women see in themselves, are not the true values by which human beings are measured. There are other values that may be hidden from them, known only to God, by which he weighs his servants. A wealthy man may mock a poor man, a strong man may mock a weak one, a healthy man may mock a disabled one. The intelligent, skilled person may mock the simple and naive, the one with children may mock the childless, and the one with family and tribe may mock the orphan. Similarly, the beautiful may mock the unattractive, the young may mock the elderly, the physically perfect may mock those with deformities, and the rich may mock the poor. But all these earthly values are not the true measure. The scale of God raises and lowers people by a different standard. The Quran does not stop at this subtle implication, however. It stirs the emotion of brotherhood in faith, reminding the believers that they are one soul, nor defame one another, nor insult each other with offensive names. Defaming someone is like defaming oneself, for the believers are but one body. The word used for defamation here, lams, carries a connotation of a piercing blow, as if it were a physical sting, not just a moral flaw. Mockery and defamation also encompass calling each other by offensive nicknames, which others dislike and feel demeaned by. One of the rights of a believer over another is that he should not be called by a name that he detests. And it's part of the good manners of a believer not to hurt his brother in such a way. The Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, even changed names and nicknames from the pre-Islamic era if they carried negative connotations or described their bearers in an offensive way, out of his refined sensitivity and generous heart. After stirring the awareness of true values in the sight of God and awakening the feeling of brotherhood, or rather the sense of being one soul, the verse evokes the meaning of faith and warns the believers not to lose this noble attribute, not to stray from it through mockery, defamation, or insulting nicknames. Wretched is the name of disobedience after having attained to faith. It is something akin to apostasy from faith. Whoever does not repent from such behavior, they are indeed wrongdoers. Thus, the Quran establishes the spiritual and moral foundations for the virtuous society, where the dignity, honor, and rights of individuals are safeguarded. O you who have attained to faith, avoid much suspicion, for indeed some suspicion is a sin, and do not spy on one another nor backbite each other. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? You would detest it. And be conscious of God, for God is most forgiving, most merciful. This verse sets up another protective barrier in this noble and virtuous society, surrounding the sanctity, dignity, and freedom of individuals, while also teaching people how to cleanse their hearts and souls in a most striking and effective way. It begins, as is the style of this surah, with the beloved call, "O you who have attained to faith." It then commands the believers to avoid much suspicion, not allowing their souls to become prey to every doubt, suspicion, or misgiving that crosses their minds about others. The verse explains the reason for this command. Indeed, some suspicion is a sin. Since the prohibition applies to most forms of suspicion, and the rule is that some suspicion is indeed sinful, the implication for the believer's conscience is to avoid bad suspicion altogether, because who can know which of their suspicions is sinful? In this way, the Quran purifies the heart from the inside, preventing it from being defiled by wrongful suspicion and leading it into sin. The heart remains clean, free from doubts and suspicions, filled with love for one's brothers and sisters, untainted by mistrust, and serene, untroubled by anxieties or unworthy expectations. What a peaceful life it is in a society free from suspicion. But Islam does not stop at this noble ideal of refining hearts and souls. This verse also establishes a foundational principle for dealing with others, setting another safeguard around people's rights in a clean and upright society. No one should be taken to account based on suspicion or be judged because of mere doubts. Suspicion should not be the basis for any investigation or scrutiny. As the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, said, "If you suspect, do not investigate." This means that people should remain innocent, their rights, freedoms, and honour preserved, until it is clearly proven that they have committed something deserving of reproach. Mere suspicion is not enough to pursue them in an attempt to verify what is suspected. How far does this text go in protecting the dignity, freedom, and rights of individuals? How does it compare to the highest standards of democracy, freedom, and human rights that any nation can boast of, even after more than 14 centuries? The Qur'an proclaimed these principles to the believers, and the Islamic society implemented them in real life, both in the outer world and in the inner conscience. The verse then moves to another principle connected with avoiding suspicion: "And do not spy on one another." Spying may be the next step after harbouring suspicion, or it may be an initial effort to uncover faults and expose sins. The Quran opposes this vile practice from a moral standpoint, aiming to cleanse hearts from such base tendencies to seek out others' faults and expose their shortcomings. This is in line with its overall goal of promoting moral and spiritual purity. But the issue goes beyond mere morality. It is one of the main principles of Islam's social system and its legislative and executive procedures. People's freedoms, sanctities, and honour must not be violated under any circumstances. In the noble Islamic society, people live in safety, secure in their homes, their secrets, and their private matters. There is no justification, no matter what it might be, for violating personal privacy, whether it be of individuals, homes, or private affairs. Even the pretense of investigating or preventing crime is no excuse for spying on others. In the Islamic system, people are judged by their outward actions, and no one has the right to pry into their private lives. No one is allowed to assume or suspect that someone is committing a hidden sin and then spy on them to catch them in the act. The only thing that can be acted upon is what is publicly known, and even then, with all the proper safeguards in place for dealing with any crime. Abu Dawood narrates that Ibn Masud was approached and told, "This man's beard is dripping with wine." To which he replied, "We have been forbidden from spying, but if something becomes clear to us, we will take action." Mujahid also said, "Do not spy on others. Take what is apparent and leave what God has concealed." It is related by Imam Ahmad, on the authority of Dujain, the scribe of Uqba, may God be pleased with him, that he said, "I told Uqba, we have neighbours who drink wine. Should I inform the authorities so that they may arrest them?" He replied, "Do not do that, rather admonish them and threaten them." So I did, but they did not stop. I returned to him and said, "They have not stopped, and I will call the authorities." Uqba replied, "Woe to you, do not do that, for I heard the messenger of God, may peace and blessings be upon him, say, 'Whoever covers the faults of a believer, it is as if he has brought a buried girl back to life.'" Sufyan al-Thawri also relates from Rashid ibn Sa'd from Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan that the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, said, "If you pursue the faults of others, you will corrupt them, or you will almost corrupt them." Abu al-Darda, may God be pleased with him, said, "A word which Muawiyah heard from the messenger of God, may peace and blessings be upon him, benefited him." Thus, this verse became part of the practical system governing the Islamic society. It was no longer just a matter of refining consciences and purifying hearts, but it became a protective barrier around people's honour, rights and freedoms, safeguarding them from being violated under any pretense. How far-reaching is this principle? How lofty is this horizon? How does it compare with the best that modern democratic nations can offer in terms of freedom and human rights protection, even after 1400 years? After this, the Quran addresses the prohibition of backbiting in a remarkable expression, one of the Quran's unique formulations, "And do not backbite one another. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? You would detest it." The verse prohibits backbiting, then paints a scene so repulsive that even the most callous heart would recoil from it. The image is that of a person eating the flesh of his dead brother. Then the Qur'an hastens to declare that they would loathe such an act, and therefore they should loathe backbiting as well. After prohibiting suspicion, spying, and backbiting, the verse calls upon the believers to be conscious of God, reminding them of His mercy and forgiveness. And be conscious of God, for God is most forgiving, most merciful. This verse flows through the life of a Muslim community, transforming into a protective barrier around people's dignity and a deep ethical principle in the hearts and souls of believers. The Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, was strict in this regard, in line with the Quran's striking method of evoking disgust and horror at the repugnant spectre of backbiting. In a hadith narrated by Abu Dawood, it is reported that Abu Hurairah said, "It was asked, O Messenger of God, what is backbiting?" He replied, "It is to mention something about your brother that he dislikes." It was asked, "What if what I say about him is true?" He replied, "If it is true, you have backbitten him, and if it is not true, you have slandered him." This hadith was also authenticated by Al-Tirmidhi. Abu Dawood also relates from Aisha, may God be pleased with her, that she said, "I once said to the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, look at how short Safiya is." He replied, "You have said a word which, if mixed with the waters of the sea, would pollute it." She added, "And I once mimicked a person in front of him, and he said, I would not want to mimic anyone, even if I were to receive this or that in return." Abu Dawood also narrates that Anas ibn Malik said, "The Messenger of God, may peace and blessings be upon him, said, when I was taken up during the night journey, I passed by people with copper fingernails scratching their faces and chests. I asked, 'Who are these people, O Jibril?' He replied, 'These are the ones who ate the flesh of others and maligned their reputations.' When Ma'iz and the Gamidiyah confessed to adultery and were stoned by the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, after insisting that they be purified, the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, overheard two men speaking about them. One said to the other, 'Did you see that man? God had concealed his sin, but he couldn't rest until he was stoned like a dog.' The Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, continued walking until he passed by the carcass of a donkey. He said to the two men, 'Come down and eat from this carcass.' They replied, 'May God forgive you, O Messenger of God, how can we eat from this?' He said, 'What you have just done to your brother is worse than eating from this carcass. By the one in whose hand is my soul, he is now swimming in the rivers of paradise.' Through such decisive and consistent measures, the Islamic society was purified and elevated until it became a living dream on earth, a model realized in the annals of history. After these repeated calls to the believers, drawing them to this lofty plane of noble manners and social ethics, and setting in place strong safeguards to protect their dignity, freedom and rights, all of which were reinforced by the sensitivity of their hearts, stirred by the remembrance of God and the consciousness of His presence, the Qur'an now addresses all of humanity, calling them to their common origin and the one standard by which they should be measured. The very standard by which this chosen community had been elevated to this lofty plane. O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, so that you may come to know one another. Verily, the most noble of you in the sight of God is the most God-conscious. Verily, God is all-knowing, all-aware. O mankind, O people of different races and colours divided into nations and tribes, you are all of one origin, so do not divide, do not separate, do not quarrel, and do not scatter. O mankind, the one who calls you with this call is the one who created you from a male and a female, and he tells you the purpose of your division into nations and tribes. It is not for conflict and strife, but for mutual recognition and understanding. The differences in language, colour, nature, character, talent, and aptitude are a diversity that does not call for hostility or discord, but for cooperation in fulfilling all the needs of life. Racial, national, linguistic, and geographical differences have no bearing in the sight of God. There is only one measure by which people are valued. Verily, the most noble of you in the sight of God is the most God-conscious. True nobility is based on God-consciousness, And God knows best who among you is truly noble and who is not. Verily, God is all-knowing, all-aware. Thus all distinctions fall away, all earthly standards of value vanish, and only one measure remains, the measure of God consciousness, to which all human beings must submit. In this way, all reasons for conflict and discord in the world are banished, and all the values that people compete for are rendered insignificant. A great and clear reason for unity and cooperation emerges: the lordship of God over all and the common origin of all human beings. Under this banner, all people are invited to compete, not for wealth, status, or power, but for God consciousness, seeking to stand together under the shade of God's grace. This is the banner that Islam raised to save humanity from the calamities of tribalism, nationalism, and all forms of prejudice. Islam sought to raise a universal human society under one banner, the banner of God, not the banners of nationalism, tribalism, or any other false flag. The Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, said, "You are all the children of Adam, and Adam was created from dust. Let people cease boasting about their ancestors, or they will be of less worth in the sight of God than the beetle that rolls dung." He also said, "Leave it, for it is foul," referring to tribalism and prejudice. This is the foundation upon which the Islamic society is built, the universal human society, which humanity still dreams of achieving, yet fails, because it does not follow the straight and true path that leads to it, the path to God. Nor does it stand under the one unifying banner, the banner of God. At the conclusion of the surah comes the occasion to clarify the true nature of faith and its immense value, in response to the Bedouins who said, "We have believed," while they did not truly comprehend the essence of faith. These Bedouins boasted to the Messenger of God, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, that they had embraced Islam, not realizing that it was God's favor upon his servants to guide them to faith. The Bedouins say, "We have believed." Say, "You have not believed, but rather say, we have submitted, for faith has not yet entered your hearts. But if you obey God and his messenger, he will not diminish any of your deeds. Indeed, God is forgiving and merciful." Truly, the believers are those who believe in God and his messenger, and do not doubt thereafter, and who strive with their wealth and their lives in the path of God. Those they are the truthful. Say, "Do you teach God your religion? And God knows what is in the heavens and what is in the earth, and God is all-knowing of everything. They consider it a favor to you that they have accepted Islam. Say, do not consider your submission a favor to me. Rather, it is God who has favored you by guiding you to faith, if you are indeed truthful. Truly, God knows the unseen of the heavens and the earth, and God sees all that you do." It is said that these verses were revealed regarding the Bedouins of Banu Asad, who had claimed, "We have believed," when they first entered Islam. They boasted to the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, saying, "O Messenger of God, we have embraced Islam, while others have fought against you, and we did not fight you." But God wanted to reveal to them the true state of their hearts, for they had entered Islam in outward submission, yet their hearts had not yet attained the rank of true faith. Thus, it was made clear that the reality of faith had not yet settled in their hearts, nor had its essence permeated their souls. Say, "You have not believed, but rather say, we have submitted, for faith has not yet entered your hearts." Yet, despite this, the boundless generosity of God decreed that he would reward them for every righteous deed they performed, without diminishing their reward in the least. This outward submission, which had not yet fully transformed into an unwavering inward faith, was sufficient for their good deeds to be counted and not to perish like the deeds of the disbelievers. No reward would be withheld from them as long as they remained obedient and submissive. But if you obey God and his messenger, he will not diminish any of your deeds. For God is ever near to forgiveness and mercy. He accepts from his servant even the first step, and he is pleased with their obedience and submission until faith and tranquility fully take root in their hearts. Indeed, God is forgiving and merciful. Then the true nature of faith is conveyed. Truly, the believers are those who believe in God and his messenger, and do not doubt thereafter, and who strive with their wealth and their lives in the path of God. Those they are the truthful. Faith is the heart's firm conviction in God and his messenger. a conviction that is unshaken by doubt or hesitation. It is a tranquil, steadfast and assured belief that does not waver or falter, a belief unswayed by fleeting whispers or inner turmoil. From this certainty springs the striving of both wealth and soul in the path of God. For when the heart truly tastes the sweetness of faith, when it finds peace in this belief and stands firm upon it, it must inevitably seek to manifest this reality outwardly in the world of action and life. The believer, having internalized the truth of faith, yearns to see it reflected in the world around him. He cannot bear the dissonance between the spiritual image of faith that resides in his heart and the external realities of life. This dissonance grieves him, confronting him at every moment. Hence, the believer is impelled to strive in the path of God with his wealth and his life. This striving is an intrinsic drive within the believer's soul, a desire to bring into existence the radiant image of faith that resides within, so that he may behold it actualized in the world of people and circumstance. The conflict between the believer and the surrounding state of jahiliyyah, is a personal existential conflict. It arises from the believer's inability to live a dual life, one that is at odds with his inner perception of faith and his practical day-to-day existence. Nor can he compromise his beautiful, upright and complete vision of faith in favor of the disfigured, flawed and deviant reality of worldly life. Thus, there must be a struggle between him and the forces of jahiliyyah around him, until this jahiliyyah is transformed and brought into alignment with the vision of faith and the life of faith. They are the truthful. These are the ones who are sincere in their belief, sincere when they claim to be believers. For if these sentiments do not take root in the heart, and if their effects are not realized in the external world, then faith itself is not realized, and the claim to be a believer is not genuine. Let us pause for a moment upon the cautionary phrase interjected within the verse, "Truly the believers are those who believe in God and his messenger, and do not doubt thereafter." This is not a mere phrase, it touches upon a real lived experience of the soul, addressing a condition that may arise even after one has believed. And do not doubt thereafter. It is similar to the cautionary phrase in another verse. Indeed, those who say, "Our sustainer is God," and then remain steadfast. Both phrases point to the possibility that even a believing soul may experience doubt or unrest, particularly under the strain of severe trials and tribulations. The believing soul is often tested by hardships in life, trials that shake one's foundation and calamities that provoke uncertainty. Yet those who remain firm, who do not succumb to turbulence and who trust without hesitation, these are the ones who are worthy of this elevated status before God. Such expressions serve to alert the hearts of believers to the pitfalls of the journey and the perils of the path. They summon the soul to resolve, to persevere, to remain steadfast, and not to doubt when the horizon darkens, when the sky clouds over, and when storms and winds batter them from every direction. Then the discourse continues, addressing the Bedouins, teaching them that God knows what lies in their hearts and that He is the one who informs them of what is within, not the other way around. Say, do you teach God your religion? And God knows what is in the heavens and what is in the earth, and God is all-knowing of everything. Man claims to possess knowledge, yet he does not even know himself. He is unaware of the emotions that reside within him, and he cannot grasp the true nature of his own being, nor the true nature of his feelings. The human mind does not even know how it functions, for it cannot observe itself while it operates. When the mind tries to observe itself, it ceases its natural function, and thus there is nothing left to observe. And when it functions naturally, it cannot simultaneously observe itself. Therefore, man is incapable of knowing his own essence, or the manner in which his mind operates, even though the mind is the very tool through which he reaches out to knowledge. And God knows what is in the heavens and what is in the earth with true knowledge, not merely of their outward appearances or effects, but of their very essences and realities. His knowledge encompasses all things, unlimited and unbounded, neither by time nor by space. And God is all-knowing of everything. After explaining the reality of faith, which the Bedouins had neither understood nor attained, the discourse turns to the prophet. May God's peace and blessings be upon him. addressing the Bedouins' claim that they had done him a favor by accepting Islam. This very claim was itself proof that the essence of faith had not yet settled in their hearts, and that they had not yet tasted the sweetness of faith in their souls. They consider it a favor to you that they have accepted Islam. Say, do not consider your submission a favor to me. Rather, it is God who has favored you by guiding you to faith, if you are indeed truthful. They had boasted of their submission to Islam and claimed faith, but the response came, do not boast of your submission, for the favor is God's upon you, if indeed you are truthful in your claim to faith. We pause here reflecting upon this response, which contains within it a profound truth, one that many overlook, including some believers. Faith is the greatest favor that God bestows upon a servant of His on this earth. It is greater than the gift of existence itself, which God grants to the servant from the very beginning, along with all the blessings of sustenance, health, life, and enjoyment that accompany existence. Faith is the favor that gives human existence its true meaning and significance, and that grants the human being a central and vital role in the grand design of the universe. The first effect of faith, when it settles in the human heart, is to expand one's perception of existence and one's connection to it, as well as one's role within it. Faith corrects one's understanding of values, things, people, and events. It brings peace to one's journey upon this earth until the day one meets God, and it brings a sense of companionship with everything in existence and with God, the creator of all that exists. Faith instills in the believer a sense of worth and dignity, and the awareness that one has the capacity to fulfill a noble role that pleases God and brings goodness to everything and everyone in existence. With this expanded perception, the believer steps outside the narrow confines of his limited self, restricted by time and space, small in stature and weak in strength, into the vast expanse of existence, filled with hidden forces and mysteries. The believer is set free, with no boundaries or limitations in the ultimate sense. In relation to his species, the believer is but an individual, part of humanity, which traces its origin to a single source. This origin gained its humanity through the Spirit of God, through that divine breath that connects this earthly creature with the light of God, light that transcends the heavens and the earth, unrestricted by place or time, with no beginning and no end. This free-flowing light is the very element that made this clay-born creature human. It is enough for this understanding to settle in a person's heart, to elevate him in his own eyes, to honor him in his own soul, and to make him feel luminous and free, even as his feet tread the earth, and his heart soars with wings of light toward the source of light, the one who granted him this unique existence. In relation to the community to which he belongs, the believer is a member of the believing nation, the single nation that spans the vast stretches of time, marching in a noble procession led by Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them all, and their brethren among the prophets. It is enough for this understanding to settle in a person's heart for him to feel that he is a branch of this lofty, towering tree with deep and ancient roots, and branches that reach toward the heavens in its long and noble life. It is enough for a person to feel this connection, to find a new taste for life, to experience life in a new way, and to add to his own life a life of honor rooted in this noble lineage. Then his perception expands further, transcending his own self, his community, and even his humanity, to encompass the entire existence, everything that has come into being through God's command. Faith teaches him that all of existence is alive, composed of living beings, that everything has a spirit, and that the entire universe has a spirit. The spirits of all things and the spirit of the entire cosmos turn toward their Creator, just as his own spirit does in prayer and glorification. They respond to him with praise and obedience, and they return to him in submission and surrender, and so he finds himself as part of this universe, a part of the whole, inseparable and integrated. He too is a creation of God, turning toward him with his spirit, and destined to return to him in the end. In this way he becomes greater than his limited self, greater in proportion to his understanding of the vastness of this magnificent universe. He finds companionship in all that surrounds him, and ultimately he finds companionship in the Spirit of God that watches over him. At that moment, he feels that he is able to connect with the entire existence, to stretch out both long and wide within it. He feels that he has the power to create great things, to initiate significant events, to influence and be influenced by everything. And then he realizes that he can draw directly from the supreme power that created him and created everything in existence, the supreme power that never diminishes, never weakens, and never fades. From this vast and boundless perception, the believer acquires new, true standards for evaluating things, events, people, values, concerns, and goals. He understands his real role in this universe, his true mission in this life. He sees himself as an instrument of God's will in the cosmos, directed by God to accomplish what he wills and to fulfill God's purpose within the universe. He proceeds through his journey on this earth with firm steps, clear vision, and a tranquil conscience. From this knowledge of the reality of existence and the reality of his assigned role and the reality of the energy prepared for him to fulfill this role, the believer derives peace, serenity, and contentment with whatever happens around him and with whatever befalls him. For he knows from where he came, why he came, where he is going, and what he will find there. He knows that he is here for a purpose, and that everything that happens to him is decreed to fulfill that purpose. He knows that this world is the planting ground for the hereafter, that he will be recompensed for both small and great, that he was not created in vain, nor will he be left neglected or abandoned, nor will he depart this world alone. From this knowledge, all feelings of anxiety, doubt, and confusion disappear, those feelings that arise from jahiliyyah of one's origin and destination, from not seeing the hidden path ahead, from lacking trust in the wisdom that underlies one's coming and going, and one's journey on that path. Gone are the feelings expressed by the poet Khayyam. I have worn the garment of life without being consulted, and I am bewildered by its many conflicting thoughts. Soon I shall cast off this garment, and I do not know why I came, nor where my final abode will be. But the believer knows, with a heart at peace and a conscience at rest, with a spirit full of joy, that he wears the garment of life by the decree of God, who directs the entire existence with the wisdom of the all-knowing, the all-aware. The hand that dressed him in this garment is wiser and more merciful than he could ever be, and there was no need to consult him, for he would not have chosen as wisely as the hand of the all-knowing, all-seeing. The believer knows that he wears this garment to fulfill a specific role in this universe, to influence everything in it and to be influenced by it. He knows that this role is in harmony with all the roles played by every other creature, from the beginning to the end. Thus the believer knows why he has come, just as he knows where his final abode will be. He is not confused by conflicting thoughts, but walks his path and fulfills his role with peace, confidence, and certainty. And if he rises in his understanding of faith, he walks his path and fulfills his role with joy and enthusiasm, filled with a sense of beauty and gratitude for the gift of life, the garment he has been given by the hand of the generous bestower, the beautiful and kind, the loving and merciful. He rejoices in the role he plays, no matter the hardship, for it will eventually lead him back to his sustainer, in longing and love. Gone too are the feelings I once lived through during a period of loss and anxiety before I found life in the shade of the Qur'an, before God took my hand and guided me to his sheltering embrace. In that time, my weary soul projected its confusion onto the entire universe, and I expressed it in these words. The universe stands bewildered, not knowing where to go, nor why, nor how, if it even wills to go. A wasted effort, a vain struggle, and a destiny that is neither pleasing nor satisfying. But today I know, thanks be to God, and all praise and favour belong to him, that no effort is wasted, for all effort is rewarded. No toil is in vain, for all toil bears fruit, and the ultimate destiny is indeed pleasing, for it is in the hands of a just and merciful sustainer. Today I feel, thanks be to God, and all praise and favour belong to him, that the universe never stands bewildered, for the spirit of the universe believes in its sustainer, turns toward him, and praises him. The universe proceeds according to the divine law chosen for it by God, in obedience, in contentment, and in submission. And this is an immense gain in the realm of feeling and thought, just as it is an immense gain in the realm of the body and nerves, beyond being a magnificent gain in the beauty of action, energy, and the dynamics of influence and being influenced. Faith, moreover, is a driving force and a unifying energy. Once its essence settles in the heart, it stirs to act, to manifest itself in reality, and to harmonize between its internal and external forms. It seizes control of all the sources of motion in the human being, propelling them in the right direction. This is the secret of the power of conviction within the soul, and the secret of the soul's power through conviction. It is the secret behind those miraculous feats that conviction has brought about on this earth and continues to bring about every day. These miracles that change the face of life from day to day, prompting both individuals and communities to sacrifice their finite, fleeting lives for the sake of the greater, eternal life. It places the individual, small and insignificant as he may seem, before the forces of authority, wealth, steel and fire, and lo, all these forces crumble before the compelling power of conviction within the soul of a true believer. It is not the finite mortal individual who overcomes all these forces, but the immense overwhelming power that the soul draws from. The inexhaustible ever-flowing spring that never runs dry or fades away. These miracles which religious conviction brings about in the lives of individuals and societies are not based on some vague superstition, nor do they rely on illusions or visions. Rather, they are built upon clear, comprehensible causes and established principles. Religious conviction is a comprehensive idea that connects the human being to the visible and hidden forces of the universe. It anchors the soul in trust and reassurance, granting it the strength to face transient powers and false conditions with the confidence of victory and the certainty of reliance on God. It clarifies for the individual his relationships with the people, events, and things around him. It illuminates for him his goal, his direction, and his path, gathering all of his energies and strengths and propelling them in a single direction. This is the source of its power, the power of gathering all forces and energies around a single axis, guiding them in one direction, moving forward with clarity of purpose, in strength, confidence, and certainty. Its power is further multiplied by the fact that it moves in alignment with the steady course in which the entire universe moves, both in its visible and hidden aspects. All the latent forces in the universe are directed toward a path of faith, and the believer encounters them on his journey, joining the immense march to overpower falsehood, no matter how dazzling falsehood may appear to the eyes. God, the Almighty, has spoken the truth. They regard it as a favor to you that they have accepted Islam. Say, do not regard your submission as a favor to me. Rather, it is God who has conferred a favor upon you by guiding you to faith, if you are indeed truthful. This is indeed the greatest favor, which none but God, the most generous, can bestow, and he grants it to those whom he knows are worthy of this immense grace. And God, the Almighty, has spoken the truth. What has the person who has found solace in these truths, these insights, and these deep meanings lost? The one who has lived by them, in their company, and who has travelled his journey on this planet under their shade and guidance. And what has the person who has lost them found, even if he revels in the pleasures of life? He indulges and eats as the cattle eat, yet the cattle are more rightly guided, for they instinctively know faith and are led by it to their generous Creator. Indeed, God knows the unseen of the heavens and the earth, and God sees all that you do. The one who knows the unseen of the heavens and the earth knows also the unseen within souls, the secrets of hearts and the realities of feelings. He sees what people do, not by what their tongues say, but by the emotions that surge in their hearts and the deeds that give truth to what stirs within. And now this is the noble Surah, which, with its 18 verses, nearly stands alone in delineating the contours of a noble, pure, exalted and wholesome world. While doing so, it uncovers profound truths and establishes their principles deep within the conscience.